There are two basic color attributes for objects within Illustrator. The color inside of the object is known as the fill, and color around the edges is known as the stroke. By default, Illustrator has a black stroke and a white fill for objects. On a standard artboard, you might not even recognize the fill, but once we move it over, for example, off of the artboard or over other objects, we'll notice that there is a white fill inside of an object. And this is different from having no fill in an object. We'll look at in a moment. Let's look at how we can apply colors to objects once they've been created. So I'm going to use the selection tool here, and I'm going to select an object, and I'm going to change its color. All right, there are multiple ways to do that. One is to come down here on the toolbox. At the bottom of the toolbox, there are two swatches, if you will. The one in the upper left is for the fill color. The one in the lower right is for my stroke color. So if we look at this object right now, we can see that there is a black fill and no stroke. The red line through the swatch indicates a color of none. Now, to change the color attribute, either stroke or fill, I need to make sure that that swatch is in front. For right now, you can see that our fill box is in front. We completely see it. It's in front of the stroke box. If I click on the stroke box, it comes to the front. And if I choose a color right now, and I'll click on here, bring up a color picker, and I will just choose any color from here and click on the OK button. And now you can see that this object has this turquoise color stroke. I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to remove the stroke again by simply clicking on this swatch down here at the bottom and to give it a value of none. While we're on the color picker over here, I want to show you a few things. One is that the double arrow here, by clicking on the double arrow, I can swap the attributes. So now my object has a black stroke with no fill. I can revert that by clicking there. Additionally, if I click on this button, it's going to set the object to my default colors. So I have a white fill and a black stroke, which is, again, Illustrator's default. I'm going to undo that so we're back where we were at and look at a couple of keyboard shortcuts that are useful. If I press X on the keyboard, just simply X, no modifiers, what I can do is I can switch which one of these is active. Right now my fill is active, my stroke is active. It can be real handy when you're working to quickly switch those. If I want to set my colors to defaults, I can press D. Again, no modifiers, just the letter D on the keyboard. It will set to my default colors. And this is a helpful keyboard shortcut in multiple Adobe products. It works in Photoshop and in Design, and I imagine others as well. I'm going to undo that again, go back to my color attribute. If I want to change my fill color, just like I did with the stroke, I can double click here and choose a color from my color picker, and it will change that color as soon as I click on the OK button. A little something I want to show you while we're in the color picker is that Illustrator provides us with multiple color models. The HSB, hue, saturation, and brightness color model, RGB, red, green, and blue. We also have CMYK color model. Now, our document can be either an RGB or a CMYK document. And it doesn't matter what our document color space is. We can choose our colors using any of these value systems. We also have hexadecimal values, which can be used if you're doing work for web or screens. So right now, if I click on different buttons here, we will get a little bit of change in our box. So for example, if I click on H, my sidebar becomes a hue slider. And then I have my saturation going from left to right, my brightness going from top to bottom. If I click on the S for saturation, all of a sudden my slider becomes a saturation slider. So you can see if I move down, my colors become less saturated, my hues come across, and the rainbow values across the top, and then my brightness again from top to bottom. Or I can use a brightness slider, at which again my hues assigned as a rainbow, but as it goes to the bottom they become less saturated, and I can use this slider to change my brightness. There's really no right or wrong system here. It's a matter what works best for you. And if we go with RGB, we're going to have a green slider, red slider, or a blue slider, and the colors opposite within it. These are probably not as useful than using the hue or a saturation or a brightness slider. It's just easier to pick from a wider range of colors, and it's more intuitive. Additionally, I could key in color values. For example, I could 0 cyan, maybe 12 magenta, and 100% yellow. It will find all the colors for me, and if I click on OK, that color will then be assigned. Another way of picking colors for an object, I'll click on another object right now, is to go up into my control panel at the top, and I have two pop-up menus here, one for my fill, and if I click here, I show swatches in my document, and I can choose a fill color that I want to assign. I can go to the stroke pop-up and assign a stroke color as well. All of these colors here are colors that have been saved as swatches. These are the default swatches. I can add swatches to my swatches panel. I just haven't done so yet. If I press Shift when I click on any of these, then I get my color panel. So I can choose from a wider range of colors. It's not necessarily for me to choose a color that's already established as a swatch. I can choose any color. I've got my color wheel represented across this bar with brightness and saturation all incorporated in there. I have the default set values of none, black, or white as well. I can use any of these sliders to pick the colors that I want. CMYK sliders have popped up because my document color model is CMYK. You can find that in the tab at the top of your screen. There is a button here which you really don't need to worry about, but this indicates if there's a web safe color, and it would assign the closest web safe color. It's really a non-issue on contemporary browsers and machines, so you can ignore that. If you need to choose from a different color space, you have a pop-up menu here, and you can choose from RGB, grayscale. Again, it doesn't matter what your document color mode is. You can choose from one of those other color models just to help you find the color that you need. So now this object has my brownish fill with the red stroke. Other ways to choose colors, other tools to help me choose colors, are the color panel, which is found up here in the toolbar. All the icons over here represent panels, and this is my color panel. And if I say show options, it will show me exactly what I saw from that previous pop-up. Now, right now, you can see that there are question marks for both my fill and my stroke, and that is because I have multiple objects selected with different color attributes. So it can't tell me what color I'm using because I'm using multiple colors. I'm going to go ahead and take advantage of that, though. Since I have the body of this pineapple selected, I'm going to choose a color here. that that I feel appropriate. And since my fill box is active, it's going to change my fill color. I'm going to activate my stroke box just like I would over here by clicking on it to bring it to the front. And I will select a stroke color. And so now I've got a yellow color with a yellowish green stroke. I'm going to select the leaves, which currently have a black fill. I will let's give them a green color and no stroke. So an object doesn't have to have a stroke, nor does it have to have a fill. I'm going to come down to these at the bottom, select them, and what I will do is I will assign them I want to give them a stroke color instead of a fill. Since my stroke was active, since my fill box was active, it assigned a fill color. But if I click on the double arrow here, I can switch it, and now I have a stroke assigned to it and no fill. So the top, I have a fill color with no stroke. In the middle section, I have both the fill and a stroke. And the bottom, I have a stroke and no fill. Another tool for picking colors is my swatches panel. Swatches panel is great, especially if you have a project and you want to be able to access colors repeatedly, or you may have a project where you need to use specific colors in multiple images. We can save these colors as swatches, and swatches are really handy. They stay with your document, so if you were to save this and open it on another workstation, all the swatches would be there. There is a default set of swatches which have a certain amount of usability, but you can really customize it to your own needs. And for example, if I wanted to save this green color to my swatches, I know there's one that's kind of similar right now, but just to show you, I can select this object, have my active fill color, and in my swatches panel, I can click on the new swatch button, and I will get a dialog box for adding a new swatch. And I will call this green because it's very descriptive of the color. When I create a swatch, I can make it a spot color if I want. It's rare that you're going to do that. By default, we'll call it process color. A spot color is a pre-mixed ink. It's good for certain types of printing, but if you're doing a full color illustration, you probably do not want to use spot color. We can choose our color mode for how our color is defined. Also, we have this option of making a color global, and I'm going to turn that on. I particularly like global color swatches because they are linked to the objects that are using them. And if I redefine the color of the swatch, everything that's using that color will also be updated to that new color definition. It's a really quick way to change colors within your document. This also has an opportunity to add to my library, which is my Creative Cloud color library. I don't particularly want to do that right now, so I'm going to turn that off and click on the OK button. And now we have a new swatch. It has a little triangle next to it. That triangle indicates that it's a global color. So let's look at that, how that works. And I'm going to quickly select all these leaves, and I'm going to make sure that they have this global color swatch assigned to them. Whoops, my bad. Select just the leaves, assign the global color. Nothing should have changed. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on one of these middle objects, and I'm going to create a swatch, and call it yellow because it's a descriptive. I'm not going to add anything else as far as changes, so I'm not going to make it global. And I am now going to select all of these and assign the global color yellow. excuse me, the standard swatch yellow. It is not global. Now, so we can see how a global swatch works. What I'm going to do is I am going to actually select all of these swatches, and I'm going to delete them. So we don't need them. So I'm going to delete them real quick. And all I did was select them and then click on the trash button. I can do the same thing here. These are color groups. If I click on the trash can button, it will delete them. All right, so I really want to focus on these two swatches right now. I can modify an existing swatch by double clicking on it. So I can go to this yellow swatch and I can redefine its color, make little tweaks to it, and it will be updated. Now the color of the swatch changed, but nothing in my document changed. And that's because it is just a standard swatch. Now I'm going to edit my global swatch, which is assigned to my leaves. I'm going to double click on it, and I'm going to modify this a little bit. Maybe make it a much darker green. When I click on the OK button, notice that my swatch updated, but also the graphics using it were updated. So this can be a really quick way to change colors in your document by saving the colors you use as swatches, and specifically as a global swatch. It will allow you to change the colors without having to go and reselect everything. So let's do this. And you know, if I make a mistake and I make a swatch and it's not global, I can come back here, double click on it, and I can make it global after the fact. And then what I need to do is select these objects, and I will assign them my global swatch. And you'll notice the color changed because I changed my swatch color. Now the swatch is only affecting my fill color because that is what is active. The swatch does not affect my stroke color at all because it is not selected at this point. Now that I have both swatches global, I can double click on this yellow one, I can modify it, and my artwork will be updated with it as well. So keep in mind we have two attributes, basic attributes. There are other color attributes which we'll talk about in another video, but right now we've got a solid fill color and a stroke color that we can apply. We can select them in our toolbox, in our control bar, or by using our swatches or color panel. So we have multiple ways to access it, multiple ways to choose color. Ultimately, I think you should save swatches when you're working on a project so that you can access them. There are other swatch libraries that are provided. For example, Illustrator has a swatch library of skin tones. If you're looking for some skin tone colors, or you may be working with swatch books. They're all found under the color books, and so there are like Pantone process system as well as their solid spot color systems, and other color picking systems as well you may have access to. So keep that in mind as you're working as well.